Okay, awesome. Yeah. It's great. Okay, awesome. It's good to know, it's gonna make me feel more comfortable about these, because right now I'm so protective of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just, nothing, I can't drink a liquid near them, because I'm like, I didn't realize it could get clean, so, okay, I feel better about it.
That dollar pizza's becoming better and better deal. Now a regular slice is like outrageous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now.
It used to be like $3.
Okay, so the live stream is started and we're recording, so.
And the microphone is on? All right. Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
And welcome to the January 31st, 2024 meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. My name is Rich Mintz and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Community Coordinator Brian Lafferty. This meeting is called to order at 6:34 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. I think we still need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. And if someone is willing to take minutes, please identify yourself.
I'm happy to do it.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thank you. And we will now take attendance by roll call. Brian Lafferty will conduct the roll call.
Thanks, Rich. Committee members, I'll call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I'll announce if there is quorum. Abby Cruzmark.
Present.
Thank you. Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Thank you. Livia Shrednick.
Present.
Thank you. Mariam Roof.
Present.
Thank you. Matthew Weintraub. I'm not hearing anything, so we'll move on. Nad Kalani. Here. Thank you. Rich Mintz.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra Leftoff. See you here, Sandra. So we'll move on, but with 6 of 8 members present, we have quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We will now adopt the agenda, which was distributed ahead of time by the board office and which you are about to see on the screen for you. There we go. Members of the committee, if there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. If you object, please raise your hand. Seeing no objection, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the December 18th, 2023 meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the December 18th, 2023 meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. Number 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. Number 2, committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. And for the record, just note that Sandra Leftoff is here before we do even.
Put me down as late.
Yeah, we knew you were coming.
The elevator's late.
Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. I said that. Number 4, all committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. Number 5, the chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Finally, before we go on to committee business, I just want to note that you might hear me cough during the meeting. I do not have anything contagious. I have winter stress-related bronchitis that I get every season, so nobody needs to worry. And I've had a COVID test in the last 24 hours, so.
No.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the first item on our agenda is a discussion of the governor's, oh, yeah, camera can still see me? Yes. The governor's housing proposals. You may, and I'm gonna give a little walkthrough of this, and then we can talk about it. You may recall that a year ago, in January 2023, the governor made a set of pretty aggressive proposals to jumpstart the construction of more housing in New York State. Among them, a proposal to rezone or lift certain zoning restrictions around transit throughout the state. And most of those proposals didn't go anywhere because the legislature wasn't ready. But she has continued to beat the drum for additional housing construction, as has the mayor and the borough president, which we'll talk about a little later in the agenda. And she came back this year in the state of the state with 8 or so proposals that she has asked to be enacted, either through legislative action in the state legislature, or is as part of the budget negotiation process, which ends at the end of March. And if anyone is not aware of this, New York, unlike any other jurisdiction I've ever lived in, does a lot of legislating as part of the give and take of the budget process negotiations between the governor and the legislature. It is very weird to me, but I've lived here long enough that I've gotten used to it. It's essentially shadow legislating, and we don't know what's going to come out until near the end of the budget process. But that is the world that we live in. I would like to thank Sandra for identifying the opportunity to join a webinar on Friday about 2 aspects of the housing situation. One is good cause eviction, which is something that we've talked about before, and the other is the replacement for the 421A tax abatement program, which we're about to talk about. I will be attending, and anyone else is welcome. So let's talk through these proposals, which the first 3 I think are the material ones, and then there are a few more after. The first one is a replacement for the 421A tax abatement program. And as a general introduction for anyone who's not up on this, this was a program that provided significant property tax reductions for developers building new multifamily housing if they set aside 20% of the units for rent stabilized affordable according to local standards, which is over $100,000 a year income, but still, and enrolled the remaining 80% in rent stabilization. And it was limited to certain parts of the city, but it had a lot of uptake. You know, it was a big, some would say giveaway, others would say incentive to build housing. It drove a lot of multifamily construction in places like Long Island City. You know, we had hundreds of thousands of apartments built during the decade or so that 421A was in operation. And some of those would have been built anyway, but presumably would have cost more to build them, and that would have been passed along to the renters or buyers. So when it expired, there was a lot of hue and cry. There was a pilot to extend it in Gowanus last year, and that has led to applications for more than 5,000 new units. Again, we don't know if it's led to it or has just sort of sweetened the pot, but nevertheless, those units are in the pipeline now. So the governor is proposing to essentially revive it. And in addition to that, the way that it worked is that if you got approved as a developer to build a building with the 421 exemption, you had 3 years to build it. And your taxes were, I think they were actually waived during those 3 years. And there are buildings in the pipeline that won't be finished within their 3 years. And so the governor has proposed to extend that deadline to make sure that all those buildings get built. So that's number one, 421A. I'll run through all these and then we can chat about it. Number two, we've talked about this before, office to residential conversion, which is a hot topic here because we have underutilized office space in Midtown. There are reasons why this hasn't happened that fast. And some of them are practical reasons. It's hard to turn an office into apartments because among other things, there are only windows around the edges of the building and you need a window for every bedroom. Things like gas and water lines typically just come up the middle of the building. So if you want to put a kitchen anywhere that isn't by the middle of the building, you need to run new services, things like that. But nevertheless, these conversions do happen. They are successful. And the governor wants to make it legal for New York City to extend a financial incentive to developers to do this so that more of it will happen. And this dovetails with initiatives of the mayor who also wants to encourage this kind of conversion. So that's number two, conversions. Number three, excuse me, floor area ratio, which is something that we've talked about before. Just as a reminder, floor area ratio determines how much floor space you're allowed to build when you build an apartment building. And it's based on the size of the lot. The state cap right now is 12 FAR, which means that you can build 12 times as many square feet of occupiable space as there are square feet on your lot. So if you're building on 100 by 100 lot, which is 10,000 square feet, you can build up to 120,000 square feet of floor space when you add up all your floors. The important thing to remember is that the state FAR cap is a cap. It doesn't permit anything. What it is a law that says the biggest density that New York City is allowed to permit in zoning is an FAR of 12. Everything is still subject to zoning, and most zoning districts have much lower FAR restrictions under New York City zoning. The reason this has come up is that 12 FAR is less dense than a lot of people would like to build in Manhattan. If you look at the new buildings that have gone up near 34th and 3rd, we just had 2 apartment buildings go up on 2 corners that are around 24 stories. If you do the math in your head, those buildings must be at near 12 FAR. In other words, those lots are built as densely as the state will allow. Some people would like to build taller than 24 stories or cover more of the lot. And lifting the FAR cap would allow that to happen. This is something that the mayor has called for and the borough president has called for. And the governor is proposing legislation that would lift the FAR cap and would allow the city to put zoning in place for any district that it wanted that would allow more density. So for instance, the city might say on corner lots in our neighborhood, you can build to an FAR of 15 instead of 12. And that would mean that on a lot that, like those, that's right now only allowed to build up to 200 apartments, you could build 250 apartments, which would mean the building was either a little taller or a little bulkier. I believe our community board has expressed mixed feelings about this. It's come up in the land use committee. There are people who are concerned about raising the cap because it opens the door for more density than we might allow. But keep in mind that if the cap is raised, it doesn't change anything about zoning. It just gives the city the opportunity to change things about zoning via zoning text amendments, which would have to go through the city council and come to us. So it doesn't bypass community review. So that's number 3. The rest of these are smaller, and I'll go through them a little quicker. There are basement apartments throughout the city that are technically not legal but occupied, and the governor's proposed a program to legalize them, which would require some construction to make them safer from flooding, especially, and in terms of egress. There are some state-owned sites that have been identified over the last year that could support 15,000 units. I don't think they're here in the city, and the governor's proposing subsidizing housing construction on them through state funds. There are state granting pots of money, various ones that are available to cities to help build housing. And right now, if your city makes planning and zoning changes that encourage the production of housing, you get put first in line to get pieces of that money. And the governor's proposing that you be required in your city to make those changes in order to be entitled to the money. There are 2 proposals about housing discrimination. The governor's proposing that people who rent apartments using Section 8 vouchers, where the federal government pays part of their rent. They already, discrimination against Section 8 renters is already illegal, but the governor is proposing stepping up enforcement to help make sure that people who are discriminated against get the remedy of being put in housing. And the governor's proposed that insurance carriers not be allowed to charge more for insurance if apartments have affordable rents set or are occupied by people with government assistance. Basically, the idea is that some insurers decide, well, to sort of be plain about it, if more economically vulnerable people are living in a building, it's a bigger risk, and she would like to make that illegal. And then finally, this one's kind of a throwaway, but it would be great if it was good. The governor wants to build a website through the Department of Housing and Community Renewal that will help New Yorkers find state financed affordable housing and apply for it if they qualify. So 3 big ones, 5 little ones. And I'm wondering if anyone on our committee has thoughts or opinions about this.
I have thoughts on the Section 8 housing.
All right, so I will call on you first and then Sandra. I'm sorry that I sent you to the.
No problem, that's fine.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I understand that Governor Hochul wants to create a new unit,
Yes.
but it would be great if she also provides funding to nonprofits who are doing incredible work already.
That is.
So just to add to that,
That's a good point.
so there's more support.
And you're talking about the sorts of nonprofits that tenants go to for assistance when they have housing problems.
To report discrimination, Section 8, the source of income discrimination.
And these are these nonprofits that essentially prosecute complaints on their behalf?
Unlock NYC comes to mind,
Okay.
and what they were doing is they found a pattern. They found out that there were specific landlords that were guilty of housing discrimination, and
Yeah.
they were able to point us to that. I worked with domestic violence survivors in helping them use their emergency housing vouchers.
Domestic violence
Okay.
survivors.
Who had the emergency housing voucher, and every single one of them had to deal with housing discrimination or
Okay.
source of income
Yeah.
discrimination. And Unlock NYC did a great job in showing us that, hey, this person that you're reporting has been reported by 5 other people, and connected us to another organization that provided a lawyer if the client wanted to pursue, the legal route.
Okay. All right,
Can I just ask one question for that?
yeah, sure, and then hang on.
Yeah, just, do you know what the reluctance is of a landlord to accept a Section 8? And I don't know if it's about the presumptions about who the tenant is, because I'm just thinking that it sounds like the economic piece of it is the same, right? If they're the rent they
It's a-
get for the apartment.
It's actually better for the landlord objectively because the federal government deposits the subsidized portion of the rent in their account on the first of the month automatically. They don't have to do anything or worry about that.
So the discrimination you're saying is it's around who they're supposing the tenant is.
There's also just a delay on the government side to have the unit inspected, have the building inspected, have the unit and the building passed. There were a lot of delays by HPD and NYCHA to just go in and inspect the unit and
Yeah.
ended up taking.
So
a
it's-
long time.
Essentially, are you saying-
Also,
Right,
there might be more scrutiny for the landlord to be like, oh, this whole, when making it up, right? Someone else wouldn't ask about it, but if it's part of this program, the landlord's gonna have to make some updates or repairs.
and cover the rent for a few
Yeah.
months while it goes through the approval process.
So it's like a hassle for the landlord in addition to maybe a month or two of lost.
Yeah, I mean, there's also stigma and stereotypes, on like who has a Section 8 housing voucher, which is a big issue too.
I didn't know you knew so much about this. I mean, if we,
That's all I know.
well, I mean, no, it's good. If we do anything, I mean, you can help, think it through. Sandra, will she be able to be heard on the microphone?
Sure.
Actually, if you wanna come to the podium, you can.
Or just speak loud. You'll be
Just speak
you're
loud.
fine, you'll be
I'll
fine.
lecture,
You'll be fine.
okay?
Yes.
No, I'll take the next one from here. Sorry about that. First, there's something called Housing Data Coalition, because you're asking, what do these things look like? What's how often does it happen and so on? Housing Data Coalition is this amazing group of young people who use data, they're using all kinds of computer-based, data means to do great studies and so on, and they have a monthly meeting, if anybody's interested, as long as you're not gonna use it for your own gain. And they're very creative, and they'll answer, well, they can maybe address some of the stuff that you might be interested, for example, but they're.
How would I use that for my own gain?
Yeah.
They always ask that, and I always am sending students, and I think, oh, it's, but they always ask that, so I'm only telling you what I know. On the dirty side.
I'm always interested in gain. I'm
Yeah,
just.
me too, but you're very.
Okay, so Housing Data Coalition is what it's called?
Housing Data
Okay.
Coalition, and if you're interested, I could even send it to you and you can distribute. I'm
Yeah, that
not
would be
so sure
great.
if that- Yeah, if I'm supposed to do that, anyhow.
No, why don't you send it to Brian, then Brian will
Yeah, and then
make sure we all get it.
responsible.
Yeah, that's great.
Violating all the rules. Okay, good. What was the other? There is a group that's actually doing the studies on discrimination in Section 8. It's called the Housing Rights Initiative. And they've actually brought a class action suit against a variety of realtors. Do you know that?
And they won, right?
I don't know if they won. I know it got to federal court. And actually, my students are the ones who answer, who call and say, I want Section 8, and then they gather the data on it. So,
Wow.
but did they actually win? But they're doing it. They're very active in this. So another one you should know about.
Okay.
Okay. Now, that's it for. The 421
Yeah,
Hey, I don't know what we're doing with it, but that's highly controversial in terms of the way the money, how much money these developers got, and the issue being, when they looked at the data, in fact, they could have built those buildings with how much they saved on real estate taxes, which come out of the functioning of the city, right?
Yeah.
So that's something, and, Hochul is, I don't want to say it because it's on tape, but obviously they're,
You just said.
I'll say it loud. I'll say it loud.
Yes.
But that's her biggest funders for her, her campaign. Her and Adams are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So you've got to run it through that filter. So I don't know if we can do anything.
it would probably be a good idea for us to find out, from an advocacy organization, what the specific arguments against.
But they have the data, again, this
Yeah.
data, if you look at how much these developers and the condo owners and so on
Yeah,
and saved on real estate tax. That data already exists. Again, you
Yeah.
can probably get Housing Data Coalition and they'll direct you
and
to.
probably even an apolitical organization like the Furman Center at NYU has
They might,
statistics, like
sure.
it's not, it's just facts, so, you know, yeah, all right, that's great, that's great.
Also, one of the issues, I went to this thing last night, I must have not wanted to do anything else with my life, but it was done by the city, they're running all these City of Yes stuff, and
Yeah.
they're doing, right, so the housing thing was last night, I don't know if anybody listened to it. But it was a series of acronyms, which, what language are they talking? There was the RA thing and then the HD thing, so
Yeah.
it was very hard to, for me, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But there's all, you know, the point that the 2 points that were raised. One is, why is this going into the medium and high density areas? I didn't understand that. I don't know if anybody else heard it. Why they wanna increase the housing or give them this whatever floor thing in high density and medium density. So why are they increasing the density of already dense neighborhoods? If anybody understood that, I would be,
You mean because
why not the low density,
yeah,
right? So why?
well, with the
Oh, isn't
FAR,
it both? Isn't it both? Well, no, I thought it was
Medium and
that,
high.
and does it also include low? Cause I thought that part of it was that a lot of the programs focused on lower density areas. And there wasn't the incentives for the mid and high density areas, and this was to be more comprehensive as
It may
opposed to
be,
limited.
yeah.
But
That,
again,
I
I'm
didn't,
stretching.
that would be
Yeah.
something we would wanna know, but the
Well,
only thing I understood was.
we'll talk about this a little more in a few minutes, but we're gonna get more information than we could ever want about City of Yes next month, when they come.
That is fine, but the point also that got raised is nobody's dealing with the loss of housing in the city. And so they're so concerned to build new ones,
Yeah.
but the point is, there's a huge loss on the rent stabilized apartments. So all kinds of shenanigans going on about that. The city covers it great, the online newspaper, the city.
Oh, yeah.
The excellent coverage, but the point is, nobody's dealing with the loss, they just want to build more new. And in even these lists of proposals, nobody says anything about that.
About maintaining existing housing. Yeah.
And making sure they're pulling these rent stabilized apartments out of, circulation any way they can figure, right?
Yeah.
And so who's stopping that? Who's taking a stand to stop it? I mean, that's really hits us, because we live here, we're not
Yeah.
living in here, we
Yeah.
live here. And we should be concerned about that. There was something else, but now I've forgotten. I'll stop at that.
Also, that was great, thank you. What other thoughts? Yes.
On like the basement thing, I know we passed a resolution on it last year, so it's good to see that moving forward. I think it comes up City of Yes as well. I think it's good to see like the state and the city are doing it, because I remember the issue we saw last year was that, you need the state to approve it so the city can do it.
Yeah,
So I
that was a
think, yeah.
pilot last year, right?
Yeah. So I think it's a good one. I know like RVFC's been pretty favorable on it as well. So I think that's a good one where I think it's like, you look at like the FAR caps and everything, that's pretty controversial. I feel like at least from what we saw in our board, it's like less controversial for the basement one. So it's
Yeah.
good to see that's moving forward, and it's making it safer. It's not like adding any housing, really,
Yeah.
just making the housing
Yeah.
safer. So that's a pretty good win.
Well, like Sandra says, we have to make sure that we look out for people who are in housing already, not just think about ways of making more.
I
Is-
just want to say one
Yeah.
more thing about, this thing about affordability. Nobody,
124,000,
It's
yeah.
ridiculous, okay, so to suggest that, and they've all defined it, that the show last night, the show, the City of Yes.
Show.
It's all dance, I hope, but, they never defined what they meant by affordable, we're gonna do affordable, and you know what affordable means, it means, 150,000 income. As you say, affordable for who, but
Yeah.
even our borough president was, I think is guilty of that, even though he seems,
Yeah.
gung ho for affordable. So what are we talking about here? And
Yeah.
it was absolutely undefined throughout that.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that does not appear anywhere in these proposals from the governor is construction of any social housing that will be acutely restricted in terms of income.
Yeah.
And that's because it's very expensive and politically difficult to do. I mean, even this 500 million that she's proposing to support construction of those 15,000 units, like, that won't pay for the buildings. That's just a, you know, a piece of money that could be given as a rebate to the developers. So, you know, I mean, I guess the response to that is we have to, even as we deal with these things, we have to keep up pressure to get more social housing built. Is there anything that we've heard here that feels like it needs action from us in the short term? Just to walk through these, 421A is gonna happen or not, and we should get more information about how the old program, how effective the old program was, and I can find something. Office to residential, everyone is sort of pushing in the same direction to make that more common. It will never be super common, but if we get more, it seems like a good thing. FAR is an area where our opinions as a community board have been mixed. That will come up again as part of City of Yes. And it seems unlikely that, honestly, it seems unlikely to me that it will happen, but I don't know the crystal ball. Basement apartments is fine. Subsidizing more state-owned housing is fine. Steering grants to localities that build housing is fine. Working against discrimination seems fine, and building a website, great. So it sounds like we don't have to do anything right this minute, we just have to watch. Does that seem to be the consensus?
I mean, what's striking to me is what's not there. I mean, I agree, like, there's nothing about rent stabilized units. There's nothing about protecting or increasing that. There's nothing about support housing. So, yeah, I mean, these are good, but not,
Good cause eviction's not there.
yeah.
I mean, the stuff we care about.
And
Who cares, honestly, who cares about what the governor's gonna do? So that's a problem.
I will say that there's been talk about a deal that would involve good cause eviction in exchange for some of these things.
She
But
was
it's-
buried last year.
It's also, you know, it's such horse trading behind the scenes that who knows? And we're already on record as saying that we think good cause eviction will be a good thing, so I don't think we need a resolution. All right, well, shall we move on to the next agenda topic? Any objection?
Rich, I just want to call your attention. There's a few Q&A or questions.
Okay.
In the Q&A.
Can I see it from here?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right, I will, I'll read these. Robert Lang has suggested that above ground parking garages be replaced with affordable housing with underground garages that the operator can operate. I actually think it's a great idea. And I know that in the borough president's review of possible sites where housing could be built and aren't being built, there were a couple hundred sites that he identified. He did identify some city-owned parking lots that should be replaced with housing with garages underneath. So I know that the borough president is thinking that way, but maybe we should push the city to be more aggressive. It's a good idea. Jane Goldberg asked if a developer regarding FAR, if a developer's purchased air rights from adjacent sites, is that amount of square feet in addition to the square feet permitted by local zoning? I believe that is the case. That's really a land use committee question, but my intuitive understanding is yes, that air rights would allow them to add square feet to the building that they could otherwise build. And I know that they can't just go privately make an air rights transaction without getting it approved by the city, like that would have to be approved, but that is how it would happen. And then finally, we have another question from Jane Goldberg. Do you have any information regarding the building coming to the southwest corner of Third Avenue and 36th Street. Let me squint and think what corner that is. That's the corner where you turn right to go to the tunnel. And I don't know what was on that specific site before. I can't- Okay. Demolition has taken place. Were we consulted at all? To my knowledge, we were not. And we wouldn't have to be if they built something that is buildable by right. It would be pretty easy to find out. Jane, if you can give us your email address or email office@cbsix.org. Sorry, help@cbsix.org. Someone can get back to you, and I'm gonna Google right after this, because I live in this neighborhood too, and I.
Sorry, which corner is it? You said the.
36th and 3rd southwest. corner.
Southwest, got it, okay, right, there was that restaurant that was closed for like ever, yeah, okay.
Okay.
That like went through a lot of cycles. Okay.
Thanks, folks in the ether. We like your participation, even if you're not here in the meeting. And now I'm gonna ask us to go on to the second topic. Sandra?
If we could, this is a sort of procedural question. Can we as a committee, I never know where the agenda is coming from.
Yeah.
Before I come here, right? And so I would propose that we, as a committee, pick some topics that we're interested in to work on.
It's a good idea.
Here. And each of us come up with something, or you don't have to each, but, well, every other one. Come up with,
That you'll come up with something.
yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, it's what I think about. No, I don't really think about that. I think about it, so. So that we're working on an ongoing.
It's a good idea.
And then we don't have these kind of.
We stop and
agendas,
start.
You think,
yeah.
yeah, all over the place. I figured we were gonna continue some of what we
Yeah.
started with last time.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just make that's our policy. We have a few topics and we'll work on them for the year.
And we spend some of the time in each meeting going over the open topics.
The open, but you mean.
The topics that we're working on as a committee,
Yeah.
separate from whatever timely things like this come up.
Can I also ask, I don't understand how the agenda does get set.
Well, I was just gonna say, the answer is that, at executive committee, which happens a week after full board. We nail down we are, which either I attend or Abby attends, we are asked to propose an agenda for all the committee members, committee leads are asked to propose an agenda. Because of when our meeting is in the month, we always have to propose an agenda for the meeting after the meeting that is coming up, which means, you know, I have to do some prognosticating about what I think is gonna happen in the next 6 weeks, which is one reason why our agendas are so loose.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think it would be great to do what you say, and let's take a few minutes in old new business to talk about it.
Right. Right, so the question would be like, why would the hopeful thing come up for us as a community board?
Well, it comes up for us because because any of these items that are going to be litigated as part of the budget process, this is the moment that we have to express an opinion, if we want to express an opinion. So we should know what those things
The
are.
state budget? Are you
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
But what do we have to do with the state budget?
Well, I mean, we are a city charter public body that represents a bunch of citizens. I mean, we don't have any formal role, but we certainly are in a position to yell at our state legislators if we don't like what they're doing.
Do we actually do that or?
Yeah, we do a lot of resolutions about, or if we like what they're doing, fine. We do a lot of resolutions about state legislation. We do.
Okay, and then the state, just so I understand the process, then you send that on to our state representative?
Yes, our community board office will pass those along. And we have relationships with all of those offices, and they do care what we think about things. That's why they come to the meetings and give those presentations at the beginning. I would say that my sense is that we have a less adversarial relationship with our state legislators than some community boards do. That our state legislators generally support policy that the majority of our community board members agree with. But there are times when, when we get out of sync, and those are the times where resolutions make it. All right, I am gonna move the agenda because I know we have members of the community who want to talk about the next topic, and that means I'm gonna pass the microphone to Abby to talk about the migrant housing situation and related topics.
Yes, I'll just give a brief overview. So as we all know, there's a crisis of housing for migrants, asylum seekers in the city. It's a particularly sort of bleak time right now. It's winter and the mayor has implemented limits on stays in city shelters, which is creating a lot of friction in the system. So around October, the mayor implemented a 60-day limit on shelter stays for migrant families. So that rolled into sort of the beginning of the year where people were getting like eviction notices to move out of the shelters. Many of those people have reapplied for beds. That is a process you can reapply. But many others have gone elsewhere. I was reading, it's estimated that 20% of people are reapplying. But then it's very unclear where the other 80% are going. Are they leaving the city? Are they in the subway? Are they sleeping on the street? It's not clear. There's also an element of children being possibly having to move schools in the middle of the year, which is very challenging just from a school perspective, and obviously very challenging for those families and those children to either have to have a long commute to their old school or to have a different school, new teachers, new friends, that whole thing. So in terms of single adult migrants, both men and women, there's a 30-day limit on city shelters. And that has proved, I think, one of the more visible crises of late. So there's a general intake point in the East Village. Earlier, a couple weeks ago, there was like very long lines. People were sleeping outside, people were sleeping on the street. Again, you can reapply, but people were saying it was taking like a week to get a bed. Obviously, that flies in the face of our right to shelter mandate that we have as a city. If people couldn't get a bed, they were being sent to like overflow waiting rooms. I think there's one in the Bronx, but there's no showers, there's no cots, you can't sleep, you have to sit in chairs. Not an ideal situation. Another thing I would just like to sort of layer in here is like, as I'm an immigration attorney, so people aren't getting their mail appropriately because all of their court papers are going to their last address on record, which was their previous shelter. Obviously, that's a huge issue. They're missing papers that say when their court date is. They're also missing if they've applied for a work permit. When they're eligible for that, they would get that in the mail. Huge problem. So I think that's just like a logistical complication that's come out of this. It does seem like the city is offering free tickets out if they're not, it's not really publicized anywhere, but this has been reported widely that
Like if you have somewhere to go.
You have
the city
somewhere to
will
go.
Help you get there.
like bus ticket, plane ticket, that seems to be the modus operandi now of how the city is dealing with the situation.
It's not that they're sending people unwillingly to places, it's
No.
that they're helping people get places that they think that they can get shelter.
Yeah, so I have seen that a lot of people are heading to Albany. Albany is now dealing with a similar crisis of housing and legal support that we're dealing with.
But with
as
less-
people get on buses, but obviously with less like nonprofit infrastructure in Albany. So some positive news as of last week, the city had finalized an emergency contract for shelters in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. So those will be available for 28-day stays, and that's contract is good through July. And this is sort of like a backup plan if city shelter continues to be strapped for space. It's not really clear to me if the city is actually strapped for space or if they're trying to stop incentives for people coming here. I think the city is facing a huge, challenge, and I think that, it's not just the city's problem, it's the federal government, it's Ecuador, it's Venezuela, it's a big problem, right? But, from my perspective, the way to deal with it is not to sort of boot the problem on somebody else, so
Yeah.
that's all I'll say about that.
So-
And then the governor has announced that she's dedicating $2.4 billion to the city to deal with this problem, so it's not like the money's not there. I just think there's a tiredness of, taking additional measures.
So I have a couple of questions and then I'll open the conversation. You were talking about a 60-day limit for families in the shelter system. So I live across the street from a hotel that has been converted into a family shelter. It's been that way for, a year or whatever. Low impact on the neighborhood. We just have some more families around. Does that mean that all of those people are gonna be turfed out essentially and put back in line at some point in the near future?
I think so, yeah.
And so that population will turn over presumably in the building.
Yeah, but again, you can reapply for
Yeah,
another 60 days.
but if you reapply, there's no guarantee that you will be assigned to the same place that you were living before.
Yeah, the mayor did say that they're prioritizing families. And if children are near schools, prioritizing, like placing them
All
near
right.
in the same neighborhood.
I mean, I understand that the people who carry out the system are working in good faith and understand the needs of the population.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other question I have is, do you know anything, do you have any updates about the specific family shelters that are in our district? Like, is there anything that you have heard about progress at the Hotel Lexington? I mean, I go by there, I see that it's operating, but I don't have any information.
I have not. It's, I need to do a little bit more looking into the permanent family shelters as opposed to these like HERC sites,
Yeah.
HERC.
Oh, because Hotel Lexington is a permanent one.
It's a little unclear to me how.
Or
people are
long-term.
Categorized as, permanently in the shelter system versus recent arrivals.
Okay,
Because obviously well, I don't know about obviously, but it's my understanding that people who are not migrants or who are staying at a place such as the Lexington, right,
yeah,
aren't subject to these 60-day limits,
oh, okay.
but
Okay, so we essentially have, and I'm not necessarily saying this is wrong, I'm just describing it. We have a two-tier system of accommodation in that some people can count on long-term accommodation and other people can't.
I think that is the case, but I need to look into it more.
Okay, all right.
That's, that's based on how you enter the system, it sounds like, whether you're part of a recent arrival versus, I
Right,
guess they're categorizing people somehow.
and it's not, it is formally not a matter of citizenship.
Yeah.
Because that's information that the city doesn't collect, but it is effectively a matter of
Yeah.
citizenship. Okay, did you have a?
Yeah, I have one question, and then if it's okay with you all, I can share a picture a girlfriend sent along with the text on how the city is involving, at least working with the single men and shelters. What is HERC?
Oh, I think it stands for like help in something, it's like a city acronym. It's basically just like the city's FEMA that's
Oh.
been mobilized for this purpose.
For longer term shelters?
No, to deal with the crisis, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Housing needs.
Um,
So I think that like migrant families who are new, who are going through sort of these migrant family intake centers are getting sent to HERC sites as opposed to somebody who is just in the shelter long term.
oh, I
if
see.
that makes sense.
So like instead of through DSS or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
so I'm gonna show you a picture, and this is how a few people are being treated. So it says this band you get with your number once you're kicked out of shelter system, 18 to 21 mandatory days on the street before you can even stand in line to try and regain entry. And this is the band, which is like what you would get when you go into a bar and they have to keep this on, and then they used a marker to put their number.
The picture that she's showing, it shows like one of those plastic bands that you get in the hospital or when you go to when you show your ID at a bar to prove that you're 21.
And what is that band? When do they get that band?
I guess it's their ID.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's something like an ID.
Yeah, it's because, you know, I mean, it's a sort of makeshift ID of some kind. Doesn't seem like a very, you know, permanent sounding system. Like it's kind of cobbled together.
Especially if they have to hold on to it for at least 3 weeks. It does say
Yeah.
18 to 21 mandatory days on the street before you can stand in line and try to get entry or have another.
That seems problematic.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought the comptroller is investigating the limit, the 60-day limit. But also this is, you know, if that's true, that's sort of blatantly violates the right to shelter mandate. And I imagine like advocates would be.
Someone will sue.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah.
I found out what HERC stands for. It is Humanitarian Emergency Response and Relief Center.
Okay.
And it's the New York City, the EDC has put out RFPs for organizations that want to essentially open parks.
Hmm.
It's like a temporary homeless shelter, basically. God.
Almost 60-day waiting period, so you said the comptroller, like, is that like a law or like what defines a 60-day waiting period or 30-day for people?
I think it's just policy from the mayor's office.
Yeah, it's an executive order type thing. Any other comments or questions on this topic?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
Sandra.
a bit off, but I'm curious about, do these people have a right to medical care? How does that work? And what happens in terms of access to care, particularly in talking about the closing of that digital and so on? So what happens to the emergency rooms? Or maybe they're not treated there?
So I know it's different state by state, but I do think that New York State has a policy of treating, I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
No, this is definitely true.
This is what I've always
City
heard.
hospitals, right.
Policy.
City hospitals will treat anyone.
The question, the second part of it is, what's happened at these emergency rooms? And how is the city adjusted to that? I realize I don't know, I haven't heard
Well,
about it now. I don't know how that would work.
Setting aside the question of emergency rooms, New York City does, if I understand correctly, provide access to basic routine medical care to anyone through the health system without any needing to prove
That would be
anything.
in any city.
But that's all bureaucracy that you have to navigate, which you can't necessarily navigate if you are someone who's just arrived in the city and doesn't have good English. I know that before this 60-day thing happened, the you know, schools, health, all of the authorities were collaborating with DSS to make sure that people arriving got access to the basic services that they needed. But I mean, things seem to be in a more dire situation now than they were 6-8 months ago, right?
Yeah, seems like mayor's like tired.
Yeah,
So that's okay.
yeah.
Yeah, seems like people are tired of it.
In terms of the emergency rooms, I haven't seen or heard any coverage of issues resulting from this.
And then sort of in a similar vein, like the kids have to get their vaccinations and so on. Where are the records kept on these kids who are being now shifted around? Is that, if they're being shifted to schools and so on?
How do they prove that they got their vaccinations?
Well, and that they know they need them, right?
Yeah.
Where are the records kept if you don't have a?
I mean, I know, again, I know that a year ago the city was addressing that. I mean, they had essentially caseworkers walking kids into schools for enrollment, but I don't know what happens. I mean, in terms of getting your shots for school, once you're in the DOA system, they know that you haven't had your shots, so you don't have to start all over. But, I imagine, and Abby, would you agree that this is probably all a little more slapdash now than it was a year ago?
Yeah, I definitely think just from my time on this committee, you know, housing is a place where people receive services. So if your housing is more unstable or if you're moving a lot, you know, those services can slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
There's not as many, you know, on-site enrollments, things like that, so.
Well, the thing about not getting your formal notices from the immigration service is dire. Like, that goes to your basic rights. And then, you know, I imagine that there are lots of cases in immigration court every day where essentially it's someone showing up and saying, well, I didn't get this and here's my legitimate reason why, and who knows if that's a defense. Well, I mean, as you know, probably isn't.
I don't.
Yeah.
It's not the type I do, but, it's a problem.
Yeah, all right. Anything else on this topic? We don't have anything in the chat. All right,
I would just say, I think it would be worth it to collaborate with, John's committee on the school investment.
okay.
They've been very, or not, somebody else.
Yeah, I can't remember who's the education chair now?
John Drake.
Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I know,
Well, accidentally correct.
Yeah.
I know we don't have anything in the chat, but we did get an email just before the meeting from a member of the public who said they'd appreciate an update on how the former hotel at Lexington Avenue and 39th Street, the
Yeah.
130 East 39th.
We don't, that was the one that I was talking about earlier. We don't have any information.
And that's the former W Hotel.
It was the W Hotel and then the Lexington Hotel. No, was that a different hotel?
Lexington Hotel is a different hotel.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. And we don't have any information.
No, I will look into it.
Yeah, okay.
Other than it's opened.
Yeah, it has opened.
Yeah, I walk by there in the morning, there's kids, parents.
Yeah,
Going to school.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right, I'm gonna move the agenda so that we don't hold you forever. The third topic is, City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, which we talked about a bit earlier. Thanks to Sandra. We're gonna do just a little minute on this now because they are coming to present to the Land Use Committee next month. And we've been invited to combine our meetings if we want and get that presentation along with the Land Use Committee. And I'm wondering what the sense of this committee is about whether we should do that or whether we should have our normal meeting and optionally attend that meeting. Brian, do you know the dates of these two meetings? He is checking.
Yeah, so in February, the land use waterfront committee is scheduled to meet on the 26th,
Which is a
which is a Monday.
Monday, and we are meeting the week before on the Monday.
Well, that's another thing to discuss, so.
Oh, we would, but it's a holiday.
Yeah, it's a holiday, so we can't meet on the 19th. So it would have to be rescheduled anyway.
All right. Well, I mean, one thing we could do is have a 2-hour meeting and go through everything, or just not do other business other than a short amount of it. I mean, I guess I'll leave it open to the people in this group, whether you think we should join. Personally will say, I mean, I have to go to their meeting anyway, because I'm on the committee. But I personally will say that I think the city of Yes for housing is an important topic for us. And that is the place at which we will be formally presented on it. Or formally discuss it as a community board, and George James, our planning advisor, will probably be there with some feedback.
I'm okay with combining.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. We can get the people who are there anyways, like it's the best time to talk to them.
Okay,
That sounds
all right, thank you.
Yeah,
You
just,
can also get the meeting from last night online, and then have the.
Oh, the recording of last night's
Yeah.
seminar, that would be great,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the questions were really interesting.
If you,
and just to one quick thing. So Land Use and Waterfront, I believe, is planning to have City of Yes at its March 24th meeting.
Oh.
Not its February.
not February, all right, well then, why don't we have our normal meeting next month at a rescheduled time to be determined via email from you, and then combine in March. That's a good idea. All right. I mean, I don't think there's any point in sort of going through the City of Yes proposals tonight if we're gonna have a full conversation of them in the months to come. Just note that they are out there and the roadshow has begun from the mayor. My sense personally from reading the proposals is that they are generally good, and that our community board will probably end up with a resolution that is generally in support. As usual, they don't go far enough, and they're about building more housing and not about protecting existing residents. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do them. In my opinion, I do not speak for the community board. All right, so let me move the agenda on. I don't have a chair's report. It's sort of come up in the course of this, but as our old and new business conversation, Sandro, should we start the conversation about what issues we're interested in sort of focusing on now?
Sure, why not?
I mean,
I'd be interested to know what what other
well,
folks are thinking.
I mean, one of them is clearly protection of existing rent stabilized apartment base,
Right.
right?
And one of the things that comes up too in the discussion, the focal stuff, I guess, is they're not addressing tenant protection in general. I don't really know what that means, but that has come up in various places. But the issue of the rent stabilized tenants in various ways really needs to be addressed.
Mhm.
So I brought it up about being eliminated from the condo
Yeah.
law and so
Yeah.
on. That means we are totally off the grid in the buildings that we live in, so that really has to be addressed.
Yeah.
But, and then you can, go from there, the warehousing of these apartments, that again came up last night of, we need to deal with the apartments that exist and what's happening, so, that's another one, is,
Was there any response on the warehousing question? Do you remember?
it wasn't put, the person wasn't that direct and said there's warehousing, as I recall, it was why aren't, actually, the person from the city who was responding simply dropped that part of the question that was raised and answered something else. And so, they said, well, how about dealing with what the existing apartments and then, but left a way out for the responders, so we took the way out.
All right, all
So,
right.
stuff happens. So if, maybe we could just, some of the things that are of interest to, other people in the community, that would be great, and then we could, have a grid and decide how we want to proceed.
Yeah. Who else has got ideas? I'm not gonna look at anyone because I don't want to put you on the spot.
I agree with Sandra. I think that is important. And I guess source of income discrimination, because it'll bring more diversity and income to our neighborhoods, and I think that's important.
And it'll serve people who are vulnerable in the current system.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in market rate housing, but I realize that makes me fortunate to be able to do that. And the majority don't in New York City
This particular,
live in market rate housing. The majority live in rent stabilized housing.
That's a good question.
No, I think it is true.
Is that the case?
Yeah.
There, because I thought the.
it wasn't for me. The emergency housing, I worked on this like 2 years ago, so I don't know where it stands.
Oh, so it's not, I'm off
it-
by some amount.
The voucher, the amount of the voucher changed depending on the zip code, because they wanted people to.
Oh, so it depends on the part of the
Oh, are
city.
you
Yeah.
talking about you're talking about the Section 8 housing?
Yeah.
And you're talking about market.
I'm talking about market, I'm talking,
It's
yeah,
two different
yeah.
conversations.
Yeah. I mean, separate from that conversation, my understanding is that of the rental apartments in the city, the majority are rent stabilized.
Oh, okay, that may be.
But the voucher
The voucher,
made it possible for people to move into market rate
right,
units.
I imagine
But
that,
under, with the limit, right? You can't go into a $5,000 apartment and.
Right,
and
but it was
have a-
pretty generous. I think a studio here in in this zip code 10016. I think it covered about 3,400 or 3,500 a month, so
Oh, wow.
it was possible.
I would
for
take
some of the
that.
people. But again, it was difficult to get landlords to respond, you
Yeah.
know, when we would reach out to them for.
yeah, I mean, it's all very nice to say that the government will pay that much, but you need to find an apartment that will.
I thought also that they weren't issuing new vouchers, that they had, that.
That was the emergency housing assistance. And this is well, I mean, you were talking about emergency housing
Oh, I
assistance.
thought you were talking
Housing
about regular,
voucher,
you're
yeah.
talking about regular.
Well, I mean, the Section 8 is the sort of evergreen program.
Right.
But you're talking about emergency housing, the emergency housing assistance.
But it falls under section.
It's
eight.
it's
Yeah.
essentially a
It's a specific
separate
program.
Section 8 pot of money.
Yeah, it came from HUD,
Okay.
yeah, it's federal.
And what were you thinking about, what we would want to pursue about that?
How to handle that, how to handle source of income discrimination in our area when people want to move in and use their vouchers.
You know, I raised the question, in my class, I'm sending the kids over to the Housing Rights Initiative, so I was talking about Section 8. And there were only 10 students, 2 of them are in the midst of a Section 8 conflict there, and it was so painful to realize they didn't know how to solve it. So
Mhm.
the notion of educating.
Yeah.
Of course, I always go back to CUNY because it's what I think about. But just educating people about what their rights are, what
Yeah.
happens, it's just, I think one of the functions of a board or a committee like this is to get involved somehow in those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
And reach out to CUNY students, you know, for example. And others, obviously, they're only one subpopulation, but that would be, you know, it's one, how do you get there? What happens? What do you do about discrimination? And how do how do you proceed to find these apartments in the first place?
Yeah.
It'd be terrific.
It was tough because you're working with people who've experienced abuse or are actively experiencing it, and then you put them in a really abusive system and see how the system's also abusing them. You know, just so they could find a safe place for them and their families.
Yeah.
It disheartening. It was just really disheartening.
It was really enlightening to hear about like the administrative burdens up front
Oh, yeah.
for the inspections and things. I wonder,
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
I think even maybe I would like to look into more of like what can be done to reduce some of those and make the process faster.
You're saying to streamline the logistics of Section 8 so that the objective frustrations of landlords are reduced and there'll be less friction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Said I wasn't gonna put anyone on the spot, but I will ask if you have any thoughts, since I know that you will.
I have agreed with what everyone has said in terms of, I think, going more to detail, things we talked about, rent stabilized, Section 8. I'll let you know if I think of more things, but so far,
Okay,
I agree. with
sounds
you.
good. We just got a comment from Ann Greenberg in the chat, saying we should check out justfix.org, which is I think you referred me to that,
Yeah,
Sandra.
Just is part of the housing,
Uh,
housing, data.
We are a nonprofit that builds free tools for tenants to exercise their rights to, okay. Yeah, okay, so that's like, how do you request repairs in your apartment that are legally required? How do you research your landlord and find out if they have other issues? How do you see who the worst evictors are? Get your apartment's rent history. That sort of, this is good. So it's justfix.org. Thank you, Ann. Anything else? Do you have anything you want to throw in?
I kind of want to look at like old resolutions we've passed as a committee and just see if there's anything to dig up.
That's
We,
a
like,
good
tried
idea.
to start doing something and it kind of fizzled out.
That's a good idea, because this does end up being so stop and start for lots of reasons. Would you be interested in doing that? Because
Yeah.
I think it would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
I feel like there's a long history of like in the community where we just do a lot of things and then it just loses
Yeah.
momentum. So I think it's like surfacing if there are a couple of things that are interesting. So I'm happy
Even
to
if
do that.
you just sort of do a boring, tedious inventory of
Yeah.
these were the resolutions in some consumable format, that'd
Yeah.
be really helpful. All right. Is there anything else? Because I mean, I'm inclined to conclude the meeting if no one else has anything else they'd like to discuss.
How will we go ahead with this part of it?
I think we should this is where I get to be chair. I will ask that the person who is taking the minutes, who's gonna have to look at the video anyway to do
Yeah.
that, note what the things are that people said in this part of the meeting
Yeah.
in the minutes.
Do that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't the gavel. You're right. All right, so that's the answer, is that it'll come out in the minutes, which, because they're being done by someone efficient and not by me, will be available relatively soon. And we will have time, before the next meeting, to think about. Great. All right, I am going to invite a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Ned moves that we adjourn. Is there any objection? If no objection, this meeting is adjourned at 7:45 PM. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thanks to those online who joined us and participated.